solo voices who portray the characters in the story, 2 choirs, and 2 orchestras. Easter's a really big deal at the St. Thomas Church. It's considered one of the great masterpieces of Baroque music. It's regularly performed around this time of year by any church that can rustle up the 2 choirs and 2 orchestras, and you'd be surprised how many there is. It's been repeatedly performed as a staged performance, with soloists not only in character but in costume and on a set, produced by artists such as Baumschin and Stokowski. But things were not always thus. In 1750, Bach died, and by the 19th century, his music had quite fallen out of fashion. Connoisseurs such as Haydn, Mozart, and Beethoven admired and studied his works, but they were rarely performed. So, let me transport you back. Like on a Midsummer Night's Dream, using Mendelssohn's music for that play, to the year 1823. The brilliant young composer, pianist and conductor Felix Mendelssohn is 14 years old, 1-4, you heard that right, and he's studying counterpoint and composition with Carl Friedrich Isolde, this guy, at the Singakademie in Berlin. Isolde was a collector of Bach works and passed on his love of Bach to his students. In particular, on Friday's outside class, his nerdy students met to try to sing, quote, the bristly parts of Sebastian Bach. The good quotes all come from the recollections of actor and singer Edouard Devrient, Mendelssohn's friend and fellow student of Isolde. Isolde has been keeping his Bach scores, in particular the St. Matthew Passion, quoting again, hidden as a mysterious sacred treasure from the world, which he supposed no longer capable of prizing it. Mendelssohn yearns for a copy of his own, and in 1823 he receives one as a Christmas present from his grandmother, Bella Salomon. 4 years later, Mendelssohn has assembled a small and trusty choir of friends that began to learn the Passion piece by piece. By 1829, Mendelssohn and Devrient have decided this has to be performed. Devrient in particular has his heart set on playing the role of Jesus. Jesus complex, God complex. They run this plan by their teacher Isolde, who responds, much more accomplished people than you have had to give up attempting this very thing. Here's a couple of young brats who think it'll be child's play, but there must be something in it because he gave them his permission and in fact helped them use the Singakademie's venue and orchestra for the performance. To recruit soloists, Mendelssohn and Devrient came up with a Passion uniform of a blue coat, white waistcoat, black necktie and trousers, and yellow gloves, so they weren't just 2 kids, but actually representing a serious society, and hit up the soloists of the Berlin Opera to play the roles. And on March 11, 1829, the St. Matthew Passion is performed for the first time in 30 years to a sold-out audience in this building, which is a different theatre today, but it's still there. An audience that included Prussian royalty, the philosopher Hegel, the poet Heine, possibly Paganini. He was definitely in Berlin at the time, and if he wasn't at this concert, he would have later lied and said that he was. And once again, the world heard Bach's arias, recitatives, and chorales. At least that's the story as Devrient tells it. Whenever the hero, especially one who just has to play Jesus, is telling their own story, there's likely to be embellishment and hand-waving. And there's a few trivial facts like dates and so on that Devrient gets provably wrong, and he arguably doesn't give enough credit to Isolde and all the other Bach scholars of the 19th century whose work led to this rediscovery, but still, the Bach masterpiece and Jesus Christ, we've reanimated two things already, and we're only a third of the way through the talk. Even Mendelssohn knew it was a remarkable story. As he said to his friend after the first performance, imagine it took an actor and a Jew to return to the people the greatest Christian music. So yes, the composer of that song without words, Mendelssohn, his family was Jewish. Quite a prominent Jewish family, actually. His grandfather was the philosopher Moses Mendelssohn, and one of the great-grandfathers on his maternal side was a court banker to King Frederick the Great. The official title was Court Jew. And the Mendelssohns weren't just philosophers and bankers, they were also musicians. Felix's great-aunt, a sister of Bella Salomon, the grandfather with the Passion manuscript gift, this is the great-aunt, studied harpsichord with one of Bach's sons and was a patron of another, and had a considerable library of Bach scores and maintained an active musical salon. Felix's mother, Leah, inherited this love of Bach and passed it on to her children, plural, because Felix had an older sister, Fanny. I'm a bit behind on the slides, hang on. There she is, Fanny. Fanny was Felix's older sister, also a child prodigy, in fact, arguably even more talented than Felix. At age 13, she could play all the preludes from the Well-Tempered Clavier by heart. Unfortunately, she had the double disadvantage of being not only Jewish but a woman, and so she was told by no less than her father that, quote, "Music will perhaps become Felix's profession, but for you it can and must be only an ornament." And though she composed as well as her brother Felix, she didn't publish any of her work. Almost. It turns out that Felix got some of her works published by sneaking them into collections of his works, which already led to confusion in their own lifetime. For example, when Felix was introduced to Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, who were huge fans, and the Queen asked Felix to accompany her while she sang her favorite of his songs. Felix asked, well, which one's that? And when Her Majesty, by the grace of God, of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, Queen, Defender of the Faith, Empress of India, etc., named Opus 8, number 3, Italienne, Felix had to admit that was one of Fanny's. So here's not that, because I can't sing and play, but another one of her songs without words. After Fanny married her husband, the artist Wilhelm Hensel, who incidentally drew or painted most of the portraits in these slides, encouraged her to publish under her own name, and in 1846, at the age of 31, she finally published her Opus 1. Despite some allies, though, she shared the obscure fate of so many women composers, and especially during her lifetime was known mostly not for her compositions, but for the salons she and her family hosted. But even this fame was not to last. After the 1848 revolutions in Germany, which luckily neither Felix nor Fanny lived to see, The upper classes the Mendelssohns belonged to, and their salons and their love of history and old music and concerts attended by the aristocracy fell very much out of favor. And between that and the ever-present anti-Semitism, here the Mendelssohn story takes a much darker turn. In our Midsummer Night's Dream, the lovers are asleep and all is about to go awry. So for context, Felix Mendelssohn was super popular during his lifetime. Schumann called him the Mozart of the 19th century. I already mentioned Queen Victoria and Prince Albert were huge fans. He traveled all over Europe, composed musical memoirs of his visits like the Hebrides Overture, the Italian Symphony. He wrote music for popular theater, Antigone, the Midsummer Night's Dream, and accessible music you could play and perform at private salons. So when he died in 1847, his estate was really keen to keep this cash cow going and combed through all of his music and papers looking for more things to publish. And they found a bunch of early drafts and unfinished works and things he composed as a child, and it wasn't all that good. And as a result, he got this reputation for being really old-fashioned and simplistic. And we've already observed that he was unfashionably upper class, as a point against him, and he was very unfashionably Jewish, so haters gonna hate. In 1850, everyone's favorite anti-Semite Richard Wagner, writing under a pseudonym, published an article called Jewishness in Music. And not just any pseudonym, no, he calls himself Mr. Freigedank, that is, free thought. And there is no way this is going to be good. According to Wagner, all European languages are foreign to Jews, and therefore Jews cannot speak of their feelings, let alone sing. They've never had their own art, they can only imitate, and as a prime example, he names Mendelssohn. So it's worth noting at this point, we're in 1850, Wagner hasn't actually composed anything that lives up to his own high standards. The first part of the Ring cycle, which is arguably where he's actually demonstrating what he's on about, was only completed in 1854. Tristan and Isolde and the Meistersinger were written in the late 1850s, early 1860s, so he's absolutely nothing but hot air here. And even though the journal he published in had a circulation of, like, at most 1,500 readers, and really nobody noticed or cared, he followed this up with another essay, under his own name this time, complaining that he was being harassed as a result of being identified as the author of the first essay, blaming the whole thing on a vendetta launched against him by the world's Jews in retaliation for his work. Does this sound familiar at all? Nothing new under the sun. Of course, you know, if it was all hot air, it wouldn't be so bad, but we know where all of this leads, and if we go, the first half of the 20th century, it was a particularly bad time to be Jewish. The Nazis banned all performance and publication of Mendelssohn's works and removed statues all over Germany. There's a story of Sir Thomas Beecham, who was touring in Leipzig with the London Philharmonic in 1936, came across one of these statues, thought this was grand, and went to get a wreath with some of his musicians to come back and lay something in recognition of Mendelssohn, and by the time they got back the following day, the statue was gone. Now, I'm not going to leave you there. There's a reanimation here. So here we go. And while the music goes off to Theseus and Hippolyta's wedding, and Hermia and Lysander and Demeter and Helena, and the Princess Royal Vicky and Prince Frederick of Prussia, who started the trend of brides walking down the aisle to that music. The Mendelssohn story continues with a resurgence of research and scholarship into their lives, which began in the 1960s with a slightly sheepish and guilty conscience Germany re-examining some of what happened, and really took off in the lead up to Mendelssohn's 200th birthday in 2009. And so there's, like, in the last 10 years, an absolute re-evaluation and rediscovery of all the music and all the stories that have been happening. If you go to the San Francisco Public Library, they have this biography by Larry Todd, which runs to 600 pages and starts with family trees and a map of his travels. It's like reading The Lord of the Rings. It's cool. They also have 2 biographies of Fanny Mendelssohn, both of which start by claiming that they're the only authoritative one. There's a new chronological catalogue of Felix's compositions and correspondence, putting them in the right order and separating Felix and Fanny. Currently being compiled. It's expected to run to over 150 volumes when it's finished. The statue that Sir Thomas Beecham missed by a day was reconstructed in 2008. There it is. And in Hamburg, a new Felix and Fanny Mendelssohn Museum opened in 2018. So, now that we've reanimated Jesus, Bach, and the Mendelssohns, what's the moral? What are we taking away from this? Well, I'm going to say the moral is do your own research. Wait, no. Real research. Like, read a book. And maybe somewhere in there you'll find value in old things, and that, like, the reason we're dismissing things is some prejudice or another, and not actually a good reason, that they have something to tell us today, like Mendelssohn found in Bach.